a really important conversation that a lot of you aren't even aware of. If I tell you that this is the 100th anniversary this month of the Armenian Genocide, most of you who are not Armenian would say something like, oh, okay, yeah, and try to pretend like you know what it is, right? And you don't know what it is, and you know what? We all ought to know what it is. In fact, the folks in Turkey don't go to them because they're not admitting that it actually existed. I know very little about this, which is why I have some experts tonight on the program to talk about it. Good Friday evening to you. Welcome to My State of Mind. I am Dan York, and you're going to find over the course of the next several weeks that we're going to, on the Friday evenings, we're going to long form our conversations. I have no rundown tonight for you. That doesn't mean that I won't catch up on Monday on the daily stuff, but we are recording this program yesterday, and it gives us some ample time to actually break down some of the issues here. Of course, I'm sure at the end of the broadcast you'll feel like we didn't have enough time. Check out this video. It helps you begin to think about it.
According to the international law, genocide is a crime against humanity. And the international laws spells out clearly that condemnation, recognition, and reparation of a genocide are closely interconnected.
First of all, I'm always struck by the pageantry of Eastern Church. There's so much visual going on there, right, Father? It's amazing. So here are my guests, Dr. Henry Theriault from Worcester State University, and you have an expertise in this field of genocide and mass killings and all of that. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you very much.
Am I correct in
suggesting
that is
no,
your
this
thing?
is an area that I've, partly by interest and partly just because it's such an important area, and I've gotten pulled into the various human rights issues related to genocide that I've had to become an expert in.
Well, good. Yeah. So you can inform us. So do you agree with me on my premise at the start that most people don't even know what the heck we're talking about here?
Yeah, unfortunately, with the Armenian case and many others, we just aren't aware, and you know, there are a lot of reasons maybe we'll get into today for why that is.
All right, Father Sanuk Suin, do I get it?
Shanark.
Shanark. See, I knew I wouldn't do it. You know,
close enough.
Does that happen a lot?
Your producer had it bang on.
And she practiced for 20 minutes, though. I apologize and welcome.
Nope.
Nice to have you.
Good to be
and
here.
your church is here in Providence.
That's correct. St. Sahagan Mesrob Armenian Orthodox Church on Jefferson.
Big parish?
Big Blue Cross. Yes, big parish.
Big. I'm fascinated by the entire theological conversation here, and I hope that we can get into it a little bit.
Sure.
But why don't we set the premise with the professor? What happened?
The short answer, as much as we can be short about a genocide, is starting in 1915 and really running. Oh, I'm sorry.
Not to interrupt myself or you.
Sure.
Bad first question. Define genocide.
Great question, actually. And as an aside, scholars have been battling over that issue for 50 years to decide really what genocide is, because there are so many cases that are on the fringes of the UN definition. But generally, the UN definition says it's the attempt to destroy in whole or in part an ethnic, racial, religious, or national group. Okay. And they list a bunch of methods that are actually 5 different methods that can be used: direct killing, as well as even things like preventing live births or births within a victim community.
Okay. What happened?
Starting in 1915, the Ottoman Turkish government, which at that time was run by an authoritarian group, they're often referred to as the Young Turks in the West, carried out a genocide against about 2.5 million Armenians within the Ottoman Empire. Ultimately, over about 8-year period, they killed about 1.5 million out of those 2.5 million, and most of the rest were scattered, outside of the borders of the Ottoman Empire, and have, come to Providence, come to various areas around the world. I should also mention that in that process, maybe 250,000 Assyrian Christians were killed out of about 600,000 that were in the Ottoman Empire, and probably about 1 million Greeks up through 1923, who are another Christian minority, were also exterminated as part of the same overall process.
What happened? They say the wrong thing? I mean, obviously, the Armenian Christians were Russia-oriented, correct? I mean, they had an affinity that way, and the Turks or the Ottoman Empire had turf war?
Yeah,
worry about security
actually,
inside the borders? What?
Actually, there were about 1 million Armenians in the Russian Empire on the Russian side of the border,
right.
And they were fairly distinct. Actually, at the beginning of World War I in 1914, both sides of the Armenian community, which was not necessarily very unified, decided it was really important that they fight for the government of the land that they were in. So Ottoman Armenians were loyal to the Ottoman government. In fact, 250,000 Armenian men were in the Ottoman army, actually, at the beginning of World War I, who were actually the first ones killed in the genocide, because the government understood if you want to commit a genocide, the first thing you have to do is get rid of the soldiers who could potentially resist against your soldiers and your police and so forth. Why it happened, there are political reasons, economic, religious. I think religious difference was what structured the Ottoman Empire. So for centuries before the genocide, there was something called the millet system, which was essentially a two-tiered social structure in which Muslims were at the top. They had as much as anyone had civil rights in the Ottoman Empire, they had full rights. They could testify in court, they could serve in the military, they could work in the government, they could basically pursue any career, any educational opportunity. People of the book, Christians and Jews in particular, were second-class subjects. They had some rights, and they had some organization within their religious communities, which were in effect the governments of those communities, but they paid significantly more in tax, a differential tax for being Christian or Jewish. They could not testify in court, so particularly as violence against Armenians and other minority groups increased, they couldn't do anything about it. And there were many other discriminatory measures against them. They couldn't serve in high level in the government and so forth.
Is this all consistent with your recollection of this history?
I would completely agree, and I would even go so far as to say, which may be unpopular among some Armenians, because we have this sort of almost legendary understanding of the genocide, but it really wasn't quite simply a religious persecution of Christians, Muslims against Christians. And that might sound strange for a priest to say that. It really wasn't so much that. It was very much a systematic cleansing of that ethnic population of Armenians, because, of course, the Ottoman Empire was beginning to crumble with the loss of the Baltic states, and they saw the Armenians as a distinct ethnic group in the eastern regions of Turkey, ancient Armenia, as being a potential risk, as you mentioned, with the Russians on the border to the east, and so, otherwise I would agree with everything that the professor said.
Okay, we're going to hold it here. When we come back, we're going to ask, why is most of the world pretty clueless about this? What's Turkey doing in response to this, if anything, or ever? Stay with us. So I think you know who that gentleman is. He is the Holy Father on the Catholic side, and he has recently spoken here in this month about this Armenian genocide, and that is the subject tonight. Our esteemed professor from Worcester State University and our local Armenian pastor are talking to us about this 100th anniversary of something that happened in a country that doesn't admit it actually took place. I mean, at least Germans recognize what the heck happened there, right?
True.
What's up with Turkey, and how does that whole thing get resolved?
Great question. If you can write the book,
The
we'll all be reading
question,
it. We'll be
right?
reading it. I got to tell you, it's a very complicated issue. Certainly the Turkish government and a lot of people in Turkey have denied the genocide very actively since 1965, when Armenians first started to really come out after the shock and trauma of genocide to talk publicly about what happened.
Wait a second. This happened in the early 1900s, 1950
right.
and 1965. They're just getting over the shock and talking about it?
That's the first point where there's real public discussion.
Why, Father? Why?
That's a great
Well, I mean, I grew up with, by the grace of God, 3 living grandparents in my lifetime who had a big impact on my early formation. And these people were suffering from PTSD. I didn't even know what that was as a kid. Now as an adult, as I look back, and I have very vivid memories of my own grandparents and some of the elderly from the church community in which I grew up, who were all survivors and immigrants to, I grew up in Canada, incidentally. And they, you know,
they were there.
They were there.
They were there.
From the various towns and villages.
Escaped?
They escaped, for lack of a better word. You know, at the conclusion of the war, many ended up in the Middle East in orphanages, and then some went back to Constantinople, from Constantinople to Greece, to the islands. And like my grandparents, two of my grandparents were in orphanages in Greece.
But did they talk about it?
Well, that was the thing. See, my grandmother, for example, would just, you know, when the subject of the atrocities and the massacres came up, my grandmother would just be like, oof, and she would just leave the room.
Is this why all this time went by until 65 for this?
I think that's a big part of it.
Is there a cultural dynamic to the delay?
Even in the orphanages, because at that time people didn't understand the trauma issues of trauma psychology. Even very well-intentioned missionaries that were running the programs told the kids, don't talk about this, don't think about it, you'll get nightmares, it'll ruin your life. And so really from early on, they were taught to suppress this. Some did, some didn't. But also remember, these are refugees who have nothing spread out into the world, and they are working in factories, they're working in every kind of job just to survive. And I think part of, you know, the reality was it took a few decades to get to the point where they had the space, you know, the time, the psychological space to talk about it. Yeah.
There's also, unfortunately, that psychological damage is an enabler to modern Turkey now, right? In terms of just, you know, if you don't say anything about it, we don't have to admit to it, correct?
Right. Yeah, and it's sort of gone the other way. I think Armenians, Oh, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Well, no, exactly, because, I mean, every thread of the fabric of what made up the Armenian people, their culture, their religion, their music, their art, every aspect of it was tattered. And so these people had, you know, you couldn't see them recovering from it. I heard no Armenian music growing up. It wasn't until a little bit later, really, maybe into the 70s, when I was maybe around 9 or 10 years old. All of a sudden, people start to sing Armenian songs again. So yeah, it's right. It kind of coincides.
So we have an Armenian comeback.
Kind of a comeback, yeah.
Okay, and so how is that impacting modern times and this notion of 100th anniversary, the Pope's pressure, the Aram, the first conversation that we had there at the beginning? They got to be feeling a lot of political pressure now to identify A, that this happened, and B, what to do about it.
No, absolutely, and really starting in the 60s and carrying through among scholars, political leaders, and so forth, there was more and more discussion of the issue, more and more pressure to recognize what happened. And you know, huge scholarly debates with deniers even in U.S. universities. In fact, I think Rhode Island has a law that doesn't allow foreign governments to actually essentially buy chairs in state institutions in Rhode Island because of this issue of the Turkish government funding, or directly or indirectly, chairs in the United States in various institutions. To install deniers, whose main sort of scholarship was disputing that there was an Armenian genocide. So there's a whole big history, absolutely, and really up through the.
How do you hide 1.5 million people taken off the face of the earth?
There are all sorts of ways you can do it. A standard government line is maybe 600,000 were killed, not 1.5 million. There was a civil war, which is absurd. I mean, there are all sorts of things you say that, for people who don't know much about the issue, don't even know where Armenia is on a map, it may sound okay, and they don't want to look any further.
And by the way, you know, I don't have a map for you. I apologize for that, but I mean, look up Armenia. We're talking Turkey, Iran, right in this neighborhood. We'd consider it to be Eastern Europe, Western Asia-ish. Is it, which continent do we actually call it?
I would say it's Asia, but it has strong relations with Europe. Armenia has very strong relations with Europe.
All right, so bottom line, why can't they spit it up?
Well, there's a great irony, too, because you see, I mean, Turkey created the Armenian diaspora.
Meaning?
Well, with the genocide, with the death of 1.5 million or so Armenians, and with the dispersion of another 1 million Armenians, let's say, from not only the Middle East, but then throughout the world, North America, Australia, Africa, Egypt, and all over the world, Singapore, Calcutta. We have Armenian churches in these places. Imagine that.
Right. The term you used was
Diaspora.
Diaspora. Oh, so the dispersed Armenians throughout the world.
Right.
Well, they've established families, they've accrued wealth, they've educated their children.
The Armenians.
The Armenians. They're now into the third and fourth generation.
The question about Turkey and why they can't.
Well, now, so our generation is saying, hey, you know what? We're speaking up. We're calling you on the carpet. Not only Turkey, but our own country here, which we love, the United States of America. Our own country is a country that considers itself a leader in the world. Not only a leader, but the leader in the world.
What do you want from the U.S.?
We want the U.S. to acknowledge the genocide, which it hasn't done officially. President Obama promised as an election campaign that he would acknowledge the genocide. Hasn't done it in 8 years.
All you got to do is look it up on Wikipedia. It's right there.
Well,
There you
Did you write that entry?
No, I did not. No, I did not.
And so
but,
we're speaking up, and we don't only want recognition, we don't only want acknowledgement, but we do want reparation. Now you're going to say, what about the land?
Hold that thought. So maybe that's what it's all about when we come back.
You're right on the.
Turkey. It's a beautiful place, but they got some secrets here that I mean, listen. It's pretty clear that there was an Armenian genocide here, and somehow Turkey's going to have to figure out how to acknowledge this. The United States of America, as Father has, I guess, accurately said, doesn't have an official admission either. Does the U.S. need to do so first and put diplomatic pressure on Turkey to say, yeah, this happened 100 years ago? Yes?
Just to clarify, I mean, there have been congressional resolutions that have recognized the genocide. Okay. There have been statements in the past, and certainly the record in the U.S. archives is full of documentation of the genocide.
So America doesn't have an official position that it didn't happen.
No.
It's just that it hasn't made an official declaration that it did.
That it did, correct.
Okay. To use the word genocide.
Right.
Okay. That's a key word.
Key word for us.
Debated for a lot, folks, but absolutely key. So, if you missed any part of this broadcast, I'm not going to go backwards. It's on foxprovidence.com online, of course, as soon as we air it, and you can follow and take some notes. The key is, it's always everything is about the money, right?
It's a big part
of it. In
life,
everything is about the money. So why can't Turkey admit it 100 years ago it killed all these people? Because if they do, what's going to happen? You're going to go after them. You were very passionate during the break, Father. You were talking about, you know, people in your parish that have deeds to land in Turkey that may be worth the paper they're printed on if there's an admission. Yes? No?
Yeah.
Is that what folks want? They want, what would the, how do you say this respectfully, the average Armenian family, what would they want from Turkey?
I think, I mean, just to add to that issue, I mean, I think reparations is a lot of the focus of Armenians and other groups affected as well today, and even some Turkish activists and political leaders and writers and so forth have started talking about reparations and how important that is for Turkey to really pay this debt. I mean. One famous intellectual in Turkey has said that the entire republic's economy was based on Armenian property and wealth that was pilfered during the genocide. I mean, businesses.
In other words, it was a grab.
It was. Another scholar calls it a gigantic plundering scheme. That's a big part of what happened in the genocide, and you know, it's wrong that it happened, but also you've got an Armenia of 3 million people that struggles with tremendous poverty. It's on a small land mass. It's landlocked. Turkey to the west, but also other countries are hostile toward it. 70 million people in Turkey. This is a result of the genocide, and reparations are a way to start to deal with helping Armenia, you know, survive.
Where do you think this
today.
sits on the world issues scoreboard? And with all the turmoil in the Middle East, you know, at all, is this a anniversary flash in the pan debate, or is this something that's going to stick?
I don't know. I mean, I could say the European Parliament has just passed another resolution on it. It's a very important issue in Europe in their relations with Turkey. They see this as part of the dealing with the genocide as part of Turkey improving its human rights record and laws. So that's a big part of it.
Same thing.
Yeah.
It seems to me, listen, reparations is something you could manage. It seems to me that if they went happened, I guess they're not going to say happened without being prepared to know what's next, which is reparation. But it's like chicken or the egg, right? You gotta before you admit it happened, you got to know what it's going to cost you. You don't know what's going to cost you until you admit it happened. So
Well, why don't you say it happened? Why don't you open the borders with Armenia instead of blockading and preventing free trade? This is a U.S. ally. They're an ally of the United States.
You look at Turkey on a bunch of different levels and say you're supposed to be our ally on non-Armenian issues, right? So they're here today, tough tomorrow. Anyway, right? Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
you allow the free flow of ISIS fighters from the Turkish border, but you don't allow the free movement of goods from Turkey to Armenia. Come on, there's something wrong with this.
Sure, no argument for me. I'm just trying to figure out how do you jog this thing loose? How do you do that?
I think as I mentioned before, one promising sign is there are Turkish people, average Turkish people, as well as intellectuals, writers, very famous people who are very strongly calling for the government to recognize the genocide and to deal with the consequences. And that's a growing phenomenon. Yeah. And you could probably go to Eastern Turkey today and find people in a village and just ask them what happened, and they'll tell you. They all know what happened. It's the government and it's certain, elite segments and other people.
100 years passed, not to minimize the death, the heartache, the despair, the destruction. There's got to be some level of bygones in order for them to cut loose, correct? I mean, there's some level of, we'll limit our demand on reparations to X in order for them to be able to quantify what the admission will cost them. Yes?
Well, I think it's a given that nothing we could do or nothing anybody could do could make up for what happened. Anything that's done for reparations is a small sort of sacrifice by the Turkish state and society. And also, no one's blaming today's Turkey or Turks for this at all. That's not what's at stake. But the way I've said it is, it's just really sharing the burden. Armenians deal with this burden even now. It's significant in economics. I mean, church properties that continue to be denied access to the church. Huge amounts of properties. It's all denied. Help the Armenians share the burden a little bit, and there's a chance that down the road there'll be better relations.
What do you tell I only got about 30 seconds. We can go all night. What do you tell your churchgoers about whether it'll happen in your lifetime or theirs?
Well, we encourage them to continue to be the voice for truth and justice and to make righteous demands of your government and the government of Turkey, which is, again, an ally of the United States.
Well, it seems to me if the U.S. got more formal, Turkey'd have to get more responsive.
And God bless the Pope.
Very possible. Yeah. The moral authority.
God bless His Holiness for making a huge show of this.
Got to run. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
It's fascinating conversation. We'll see you on FoxProvidence.com.
Tremendous honor.
Keep this story alive. So watch it, tweet it out. Be right back.
Thank you.
The actual anniversary is April 24th. You should talk about this. We can't afford to keep it quiet. Monday, a Senate move to bring basketball teams together, which is what should happen in Rhode Island. We'll see you then on MyRI TV. Don't forget, weekdays, noon to 3, the Dan York Show on WPRO, 630 on AM dial, 99.7 FM on your FM dial. It is a spring weekend. I know exactly what I am doing. Praying for Turkey to admit and trying to hit the ball down the middle. Good night.